So out here in California, we were doing great with the coronavirus. Woo! First thing, the caliphate has done right and better than the rest of the nation in decades. In decades, um, our infection rate per capita was pretty low, especially considering how many urban centers and stuff we have in this state. New York waited just a couple of weeks more than us, longer than us, to lock down and start taking this seriously. New York has 13 times as many cases per capita as California. Of course, that happens because the virus left unchecked doubles every 3 days. So you wait 3 days longer, you have twice as many cases. You wait 6 days, you have 4 times as many cases. You wait just 9 days longer to shut down, you have 8 times as many cases. Roughly. New York waited about 2 weeks, they got 13 times as many cases per capita. Simple math. So, whoop for California, except because we don't have a calamity out here. It's bad in Los Angeles mostly, and then a bit in the Bay Area, but people started getting careless, not taking it seriously. And I only get out of here about once every 2 weeks or so, but I could see it, the difference. People being careless last time I went out. People walking around without masks, people gathering in groups, shaking hands, how you doing, man? And all that kind of stuff. The result, we had peaked. We had 11 straight days of decline in the number of new cases. 11 straight days. The last 3 days have been the worst days of the whole pandemic in California. Huge spike, way above the previous peak, three days in a row. It's just, people don't, I guess they're not good at math or science or something, and they don't understand exponential growth and how that works. This entire pandemic started with one case. One person got sick. And now the whole planet is engulfed in this. That's what you call exponential growth. You should have studied that in school. It's not something where you can just kind of, it's not too bad, let's roll along with it. It doesn't work that way. It must be contained. So that's what's happened down here in California, and hopefully it's not too bad. Because do you remember about 6 weeks ago, I think it was, I made a video where I said everybody has to do two things. Everybody is a soldier on the front line in this. Everybody has to, one, do everything they can to not get infected, and two, do everything they can if they do get infected to not pass this on. If everybody had become a germaphobe on that day, this would almost be over right now. The disease would have burned itself out. We're getting around 30,000 new cases a day in the United States. Every one of those cases is because somebody wasn't careful. Every one of them. Because we're way past the point where people who are already infected and people who lived with them would have gotten sick and presented as cases. Every one of these cases is community spread caused by carelessness and foolishness. So people who want this to be over, I can tell you exactly why it's not over. It's not over because of people not taking it seriously. That is why it's not over in the United States. Once we push this down below a certain point, we can go back to containment, because now we have the medical system in place to contain, to test, to contact trace. But you have to push it way the hell down before you can do that. Now, as far as the economic damage the lockdown is doing, I call bullshit on that. And I'll tell you why. The lockdown is preventing economic damage. It's preventing it. We are protecting the economy with it. Now, I understand there's a lot of stuff that can be loosened up. There's a lot of stuff that can be loosened up as long as it can be done safely. But we cannot do anything that cannot be done safely, because this thing will just explode. And what happens when it explodes, we know. We know from Wuhan, we know from Iran, we know from a few cities in Italy. It explodes exponentially. You have mass sickness, mass casualties. You think that doesn't destroy the economy? If we had not done the lockdown, we would have millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of people sick. We would have a million dead and a million about to die. And Do you think the economy would be doing good? Do you think people would be going to work? No, they wouldn't even be going to essential services jobs. The guy who keeps the lights on might not be able to go to work. The guys who make the masks, the PPE, might not be making masks and PPE. The doctors and the nurses might not be showing up for work. You know, Italy lost over 100 doctors dead to COVID. Over 30 nurses. I always wondered why less nurses than doctors, because the nurses generally have closer contact with the patients. I think it's because when it comes to things like PPE and being careful, the nurses are less arrogant than doctors are and more careful. I don't know. I could be wrong. But anyway, it would have fallen apart. It would have completely crumbled and fallen apart. And that is why every nation on earth that had the capability to do a lockdown when COVID arrived ended up doing so. So if you think they're wrong, then you think you know more than every country on earth. And if even Sweden gave in and did a lockdown. And if you think they're wrong, then you think you know more than all the top virologists and epidemiologists that these countries employ to advise them and construct their things. Or you think that maybe it's a giant conspiracy that the Israelis and the Arabs and the Russians and the Chinese and the English and the French and the Germans and the Americans and the Canadians and everybody is in on. A big conspiracy to do whatever it is that you think this is a conspiracy to do. It's one of those things. It's either a global conspiracy that all the countries are in on, or all the countries are stupid, or it's actually a deadly viral pneumonia that must be stopped and contained. It's one of those three possibilities. So, considering all the dead bodies and all the people that I personally know who've gotten sick, I don't know anybody who's died, but Hoople's cat's co-worker died. May he rest in peace. And, of COVID. But I do know people who've gotten very, very sick with it. Strangely enough, the one old lady who got it that we know, who had lots of comorbidities, she cruised right through it like it was nothing. But the young guy who was basically a professional athlete, it damn near killed him. And he thinks it's going to be a year or so of training before he can get unwrecked. So, it's just the reality. The virus was going to destroy the economy any way you slice it. That's a fact. The way we're doing it with the lockdown is a controlled thing that allows the economy to keep functioning so that we can recover from this. That's a fact. It sucks. That's a fact. It's hitting me personally. My son lost his job, and it's not going to come back right away because it's in, for an oil chemical and tool company, and the oil patch is not coming back anytime soon. And he needed that job. He had medical bills from his cancer. He has need for further, for MRIs to make sure it doesn't come back. It's a miracle. Thank you, Lord, that he is still with us, and doing so well. But he needed that job. But when it hits your kids, it's 10 times as bad as when it hits you. Any parent can tell you that. So don't think I don't know how much this is hurting. But the devastation was inevitable. And the devastation we're getting by doing a controlled version of it is a tiny fraction of what would have happened if 2 million Americans died. And if you don't think that would have happened, consider with all the lockdown and all the other thing that's gone on, we have 48,000 deaths in the United States from COVID. 48,000. And there's kooky theories going around, hospitals are faking COVID deaths because they get $19,000 every time they do. First off, that's complete bullshit. No, they don't. The thing is, hospitals are getting paid 20% more than the normal rate for Medicare COVID patients. That's all. And they need that because otherwise they'd be out of business. And they're still going to need federal support to stay in business because they have had to shut down all of their bread and butter, all the elective surgeries and all non-emergency treatments. And it's also, bullshit that numbers are being faked by that or because of that, because they'd be facing multiple felonies for each and every event that they did that. And if they did it with a couple dozen patients, faked their, you're talking decades, half a century in jail. Um, Nobody's going to risk that, especially rich doctors. Um, and it's also bullshit because COVID patients are being sent to one hospital and non-COVID emergency patients are being sent to a different hospitals, and non-emergency patients are being told to go home. It's very, very hard to fake who's COVID and who's not. So, you know, you can keep following a little article that appears here where some researcher allegedly said that this works or that doesn't or whatever. When you track it down, it's always bullshit. Or you can just go with the obvious facts that are in front of you. 48,000 Americans died so far with the lockdown. We know even if we have peaked and are on the way down, at least that many more are going to die on the way down. We're going to be over 100,000 dead, even with everything we've done. Without it, no question, it would be millions. And if you can't see that, then I'm just going to gather that math and science were not your strong suits in school. And if math and science weren't your strong suits in school, maybe you shouldn't be relying on your own thinking to analyze math and scientific things. Just saying. So which is it, guys? Is it a global conspiracy of all the countries in the world? Are all the countries in the world and all their medical advisors and all their leaders stupid? Or did we need to do this? You decide. I'm out.